Here's CNN, because I thought this was interesting. We'll watch a minute of this. Chris Wallace, who's on CNN now, used to be on Fox News. He was on Fox News for the better part of 2 decades. And Chris Wallace is a conservative, but the only reason Chris Wallace was on Fox News is because Chris Wallace is an actual journalist. And he brought a lot of credibility to Fox News, and that's why they hired him. And I can't believe he stayed as long as he did, but when things started to get they were bad, but when they got really, really bad, he just walked. The money wasn't good enough anymore. I'm not saying he's a hero or anything, but he's got a unique perspective from a guy who was there. He was he was under the eye of Mordor for fucking ever. Now he's out. So this is CNN. They're going to cover a little bit. I just want to hear Chris Wallace talk about this for a second, because I thought it was interesting.
In the moments following former President Donald Trump's conviction, conservative media figures took to the air to rip the verdict, slam the trial, and take aim at the judicial system.
Then we're going to vanquish the evil forces that are destroying this republic.
It's a sad day for our justice system, the best justice system ever created by man, the foundation of our constitutional republic. It's literally dying before your eyes.
So are we going to establish a precedent where the president can put his political opponent in jail? It's the type of power we usually see dictators exercise in China and Cuba and North Korea.
So some of the right's most popular names openly calling for the government to become Trump's weapon of choice for revenge against his political enemies.
Here's some of what we've seen from folks online. The Daily Wire's Matt Walsh, who's millions of social media subscribers, said Trump should, quote, make and publish a list of 10 high-ranking Democrat criminals who he will have arrested when he takes office, end quote.
Just such whiners, man. Whine. Poor us. Anyway, let's jump into Chris Wallace here. So, he's going to comment on all this, which I think is going to be interesting because he's
Chris Wallace.
He's been on the other side.
Who's talking to Chris Wallace on Max and the Chris Wallace Show, airing Saturday mornings here on CNN. Does any of that rhetoric surprise you?
No. Unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me. That's where it's been headed. But think how different the situation is from 8 years ago. In 2016, Donald Trump's brilliant move was to put out a list of conservative judges who he would consider to name to the Supreme Court. Now you've got right-wing commentators saying, put out a list of the top Democrats you're going to put in jail as soon as you get into office. That's a sign of how much the Republican Party and MAGA world and the political conversation in this country has changed over the last 8 years.
It seems like some of the rhetoric and some of the lines that we hear there, that just gets co-opted by some Republican officials who run with it, even some who you might suspect don't always believe it in their hearts, but that's the political messaging that they go with. How damaging do you think it really is when they're taking aim at the judicial system, especially I think of like Tim Scott saying the judicial system hunts Republicans while it protects Democrats, but Bob Menendez and Hunter Biden might think otherwise.
Well, some of the people that you showed on that screen a moment ago, I don't think know better. There are people who do know better, and I think of somebody like Tim Scott and some of the Marco Rubio knowing better. But you got to fall in line. If you're going to have a place in this Republican Party, you got to fall in line with the MAGA talking points and with Donald Trump's talking points. I mean, you had a moderate former governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, who's running for the Senate in Maryland, a really blue state, and the real possibility that he can turn a blue seat red and maybe give the Republicans control of the Senate, pretty important thing. All he said yesterday was, we in this country need to respect the verdict of the jury, and one of the chairs of the Trump campaign said his campaign is finished. The point is, if you don't fall in line, you are out.
I think that's interesting that he brought up Hogan, because that is true in Maryland. He had a decent shot here of potentially taking that Senate seat. And if he did, there was a good chance the Republicans would take control of the Senate on Biden. If Biden gets reelected or Trump, it doesn't really matter. They could take control of the Senate here in 2025. Well, that's out the window now, because he said it was a fair trial. All he said. We have to respect the verdict. But because he didn't kiss the ring and lie and get up there and say it was bullshit, they blew that out of the water. I mean, they literally cutting off their own nose to smite their face, but they have to fall in line and do that. They have to prostrate themselves and show their loyalty to the MAGA base, to Trump. And because of that, I mean, they've weakened the party, they've weakened the country. You know, I mean, it's amazing. But, and, you know, Chris Wallace, granted, he's saying all this, but Chris Wallace used to take marching orders from Fox News. So he knows about having to fall in line and kiss the ring. He's done it many, many times. He just never had to do it for Trump. You know? So I mean, I'm not saying he's a hero or a good guy or anything. I'm just saying.
This might be the most extreme it's ever been, because quite frankly, some of that falling in line, whatnot, you know, I think is a little par for the course, unfortunately. But under Trump, it's so extreme. And the things you're falling into line to are so out there, you know?
Right.
As opposed to what you would consider your normal political nonsense. This is just really out there political nonsense.
Well, and it's just open lying. That's the thing about it. It's just saying that the trial was rigged. It wasn't rigged. When they lose the election, saying the election was rigged. We know it wasn't rigged. When things don't go their way, they blame everybody else. Right, it's the Democrats. They're doing this, right? You know, he did that whole thing, Biden's trying to assassinate me. Now they're doing Biden's trying to put me in jail. That's why I got convicted. And Biden didn't have anything to do with it. And they're doing that whole thing while at the same time, his attorneys had just argued in the Supreme Court that the president should be able to imprison or kill his political opponents. And Trump's lawyers, that Trump paid, are arguing that in court. And then they're saying, well, but Biden's doing that. It's terrible. Well, you just argued that you should be able to do that and get away with it. So it doesn't apply. See, it's just such a huge bowl of doublethink and hypocrisy. They don't get it, and they don't see it that way. And Chris Wallace made a good point. Some of them know better, and they're just lying because they have to go along to get along, and they don't mind lying and being immoral. Some of them don't know any better. They're just flat out immoral and stupid. I mean, but that's still the base at the end. They're immoral and they're horrible people.